Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Terry Mart with the Illinois Channel, and I'm joined with Jeff Berkowitz with Public Affairs TV. Jeff, there's so much going on right now that we wanted to bring people a developing story. The House Oversight Committee has been doing an investigation into what they call the weaponization of government. Part of that is an investigation of the FBI and whether the FBI has been slow-walking investigations into a number of cases, including an investigation into allegations of corruption by both Hunter Biden and President Biden. And they have asked for documentation. The Oversight Committee, from the FBI. The FBI has been refusing to give them that. And the House members threatened to hold Director Christopher Wray of the FBI in contempt of Congress. Now, just this morning, we have a document that has been released. And basically, folks, you can read it all for yourself. But it basically says that until recently, Director Wray of the FBI did not even acknowledge that this form, which is a 1023 form, existed. Now the FBI director says that he will allow us to see it at FBI headquarters, and the committee is saying that isn't going to fly, that we asked you to produce the document for the committee, and if you fail to hand over the 1023 form as required by the subpoena, House Oversight Committee will begin contempt of Congress proceedings against Director Christopher Wray of the FBI. Jeff, folks, is a lawyer, among other things, or has been a lawyer in his checkered past. What is a 1023 form, Jeff?
It's basically just it's an allegation. It's a form that records by the FBI and records in terms of writing something down, allegations that are being made about somebody. It's not, I don't think the statement is made under oath. Nobody's there to question it. So it's not really what you'd call probative evidence in a court of law.
So basically, it's an allegation that someone is making, and they're making it on paper in this case. They're stating it. It could be a false allegation. It could be factual. So
we don't know.
We don't know. But part of the reason to bring this up, as I mentioned, is this is not just about what is or is not true relative to allegations against Joe Biden. It is part and parcel, and the fact that the committee had to subpoena the FBI director to produce a document does fall into what we have heard, frankly, on both sides of the aisles for years, that many in the bureaucracy are refusing to hand over documents when Congress requests them, or they're slow walking it. They find excuses. So there is something here. But let's go back to how this might potentially come out. It's an ongoing investigation, could have political ramifications, because the other thing that you and I want to talk about is what's going on in the presidential election. We're going to be focusing in the near term here on the Republicans. It seems like the Republicans is where all the action is, that there's very little action on the Democratic side. But if this were to gather steam, this investigation into what's going on with Hunter Biden, with these allegations of payoffs to President Biden when he was the vice president, it could have a political impact. What's your initial read on what impact this might have, Jeff?
At the moment, very little. What's going on as we tape this on June 1 is that the candidates in the GOP primary for president are in Iowa, and Donald Trump is there or will be there soon. DeSantis has been there for a day or two. And Haley will be coming in, Nikki Haley, Ambassador Nikki Haley, for the roast and ride with Senator Joni Ernst in Iowa on Saturday. Tim Scott will be in for that. Senator Tim Scott, who entered the race. Vivek Ramaswamy, who's an important candidate, actually polling in some polls at 3 or 4%, up with Mike Pence, who will also be there this week. So really the six main candidates at the moment in the GOP primary for president will all be in Iowa in the next few days, especially for the Senator Joni Ernst roast and ride, which is a big deal. I think that's at the Iowa State Fairgrounds. And so the main thing here on June 1 is the presidential primary, even though Iowa is a caucus state, not a primary state,
Right.
is really starting. We're getting into this. How the Comer investigation fits into this, at the moment, not so much. At the moment, they're talking about who is President Trump. Not who is he, but is he still fit to be the big 800-pound gorilla in the room? Because he's polling at 53%. And nationally, we don't know, polling, and Ron DeSantis polling half of that at 26% nationally.
I mean, we have a document which we showed the audience last week. I just wanted to bring that up. This is a
So
look,
you can
folks,
see the
these
numbers
numbers are going to change from one day to the next. One thing to mention is we have Mike Pence, former vice president, in there at 6%. Pence is going to be coming out as officially as a candidate for president. Last time we brought this up, he was not. So he is another addition. And also former governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, who supported Trump at least in 2016, he is going to be coming out and running. I think Chris Christie's star has kind of already peaked, but we'll see.
Right. Yeah, Christie's coming in as a puncher. That's it. He's the former prosecutor, former U.S. attorney. He's a puncher. He's going to throw some punches. They may not redound to his credit. Somebody else may benefit from, but he knows how to throw a punch. Maybe not how to take a punch, but to throw a punch. Vivek Ramaswamy, who wasn't on there, is polling at, surprisingly to some people, at 4% or so, even though he's 37 years old. He's the first millennial. He's not well known. He's not held office before, public office, and yet he's up there with these folks. So he's the sixth candidate not mentioned there.
I don't have any stats right now updated, but last I saw, Robert Kennedy Jr. had about 20% of the vote against Joe Biden. We talked, Joe Biden could be damaged. There's also consternation among some in the Democratic Party that because Biden is polling poorly against Trump, and if this investigation comes out, one would think he is going to be hurt politically, Biden, that is. Not to mention, of course, that a lot of people think that Biden has some form of dementia, and that could he even stay in office for another 5 years from now. So the issue is then, needs to be asked, so let's ask it. Is Biden going to be the nominee? I think I'm going to come out and say Joe Biden will not be the Democratic nominee in 2024, that he is going to be too damaged, and somewhere along the way there's going to be other people that come to the fore and take him on. And I would offer, and to get your response, that two of those people that could make a real run for the Democratic nomination would be Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, who I would say has built bridges to the left wing of the party, and yet he could also make an argument, as he just did on this budget deal, that he has been a fiscally responsible person who has, in his idea, produced a balanced budget. What do you think about the chances of Biden not being the nominee and whether Pritzker or Gavin Newsom could be?
Look, people have been saying he's senile for a long time. You and I were saying that before he became president. Just looking at him hiding in his basement and trying to do, or not trying to do, press conferences. And yet he somehow got through all of that. That was COVID. Maybe that allowed him to have that excuse so he could hide in the basement, but he hid in the basement, didn't do press conferences, and he became president of the United States. So am I highly confident he won't be the nominee? No. I mean, clearly he's suffering from some form of dementia. Clearly he's close to being senile, but he appears to be on meds that allow him to rally and sometimes perform. And is that enough for the Democratic Party? Apparently they think so. They say, look, if Trump is the nominee, this guy beat him once before, he can do it again. And so you can't beat somebody with a nobody. Pritzker is not coming in yet. Gavin Newsom is not coming in into a Democratic primary.
I think they'll wait. And so I think they would wait until at least the end of the year, and they want to see how damaged Is Biden in the polls? How damaged is he by whatever the House Oversight Committee might bring up? And folks, you know, Jeff and I are looking up until the last minute before we start recording. You got to start at some point. But just as we brought up the Comer thing that just came out today, also there was the reporter, John Solomon, who has done many breaking stories. He has a website, justthenews.com. But on that website, they also today came out, and I didn't have a chance to create a graphic on this, that if you want to, that 10,000 photos from the Hunter Biden laptop are now published online at bidenlaptopmedia.com. So bidenlaptopmedia.com, if you want to look it up and see what's on that laptop and if it is or isn't embarrassing, or if it is or will possibly damage President Biden.
Terry, what we want to do, just so we don't use up all our time,
right.
There is this Democratic issue. There is the issue of Biden being damaged, possibly damaged, by the Comer Committee and other allegations about him. But at the moment, that's a long way away. They're getting one document that they're getting access to. They're not even getting the document, and they can go look at it. And the question is, as we've said, how probative is that document? Not very.
Well, people don't use the term probative, so use another word to explain a legal term.
Does it help? Could the DOJ file a case that purports to be beyond a reasonable doubt that Joe Biden has engaged in bribery? We are way far away from having evidence that we know of that that's the case.
Here's where I would agree with you, and I would agree with you and disagree with you, and we'll move on to another issue.
Yeah.
You're talking about legal proceedings and guilt. I'm talking about the impact of negative news that will be coming out from these committee hearings, from these photos that are now published online, and that could come out and damage the political future of Joe Biden and undermine his ability to remain the nominee. That is not what the DOJ does. That is what the people of America think after they see what they will see and after they hear what they will hear. Now, the big story that has also happened this week, we can move on to the debt ceiling. Interestingly,
no, I don't want Terry,
excuse me,
I don't want to go to the debt ceiling yet. I want to cover the Republican primary.
Okay.
I want to tell people something about these candidates. Well, you just told them what they already know. We got half the show left. Let's focus on that. Let's tell them about Donald Trump. He's the former president. He's 76 years old. He's got 6 investigations, 4 state investigations, 2 federal investigations coming at him, 2 from the Department of Justice. That's the issue of classified documents that he obviously took with him when he left the presidency. Was that appropriate or not? Was it legal or not? There's a federal investigation that could become a federal lawsuit. He's got the January 6th investigation that could become a federal lawsuit. He has the state investigation coming out of Manhattan DA, Bragg looking at
the
that.
People can't keep track of all these different things. The big picture is you're going to argue the same thing I was just saying, that Donald Trump could be politically damaged by a series of allegations in courtrooms, some civil, some criminal, and that will be negative news. I would say that. We have 2 people where we both of them. This is what they pull now, but politics changes, and it changes because of what's happening in the news, and so both of these candidates could be damaged.
Let's go on. Other than to say, Trump, this is not imaginary. He has a trial date set in New York for March of 2024, right as the primaries are getting started, and after Iowa's got the caucuses going on, New Hampshire primary. That's set.
Where is that set? Set where? Is that Bragg?
That's set in New York. Yes,
that's Bragg in New York. That a lot of people
Yeah.
Would say on both sides of the aisle. Democrats have come out and said, "Man, if that's all you got, this is ridiculous to bring this charge."
Well, I don't know about people's theory, but that's a criminal case. There's a trial set. There would be a jury.
Could it still be thrown out by a judge?
It could be, but I would say at the moment, unlikely.
You would admit, as a former practicing attorney, that it's a weak case.
I don't know that. Yeah, I don't really.
Have you looked
I know
at the
people
indictment?
say that. I haven't looked at the evidence, Terry. An indictment is simply allegations. What we need to know as to how strong or weak it is,
Well,
what's
but
the
people
case, and
who've
what's the
looked at it
support
said
for
it's
it.
very
Who are
weak.
the witnesses? Who are the witnesses, Terry? What is the documentation? I don't know that. You don't know that.
Bragg,
It could
well,
be,
Bragg hasn't
okay.
even charged a crime per se,
Let's go
right?
on. Let's go on, Terry, because let's
Well,
tell
we want to
people a
be.
little bit about Ron DeSantis, okay? Because a lot of people don't know. He's 44 years old. He's been in his view, a winner. You know, he's a modest means,
I
and
think
he ends
most
up
people who
going
follow
to,
politics know who Ron DeSantis is.
no, they may not. They don't know he went to Yale, he went to Harvard Law School, he came
He was
out,
a Navy
he's
SEAL. He was a member of
5 years
Congress.
5 years in the military, 6 years in the Congress, 5 years as Florida governor, transforming the state of Florida into a Republican state. When he won governorship with 0.4%. He won re-election with 20%. They don't know that, Terry, and it's
Well,
important that they start finding
they
these
may
things
or may
out.
they may
That's what
not.
we're trying to
I
do.
think the people that
And
probably watch our show are politically aware.
so the point is, there's going to be a choice here. You couldn't think of more candidates that are more different than Donald Trump and Ron DeSantis. Some people say, well, with DeSantis, you get the same policies, but none of the baggage. But there's more to it than that. I've outlined a very different background for his first 44 years than the 76 years of Donald Trump. Different people, maybe very similar on the issues. We'll have to find out just how similar. We'll also have to find out is
What
DeSantis
are
what he says he
let's
is.
harsh. Okay, so we know that
Yes,
DeSantis and Trump are in the lead. The other people are
right.
after. It's been said they're running for vice president or a cabinet post or something else.
Or maybe something happens to Trump and DeSantis, in which case
In
Nikki
which case
Haley
they're there,
and perhaps
or
Senator Tim Scott become realistic alternatives.
right.
Just as we said, if something happens to
Tim
Biden,
Scott,
well, then
Senator.
Newsom and Pritzker become alternatives. We
Right,
don't know these
right.
things. We'll find out,
So
right?
what in your estimation is Donald Trump's strength?
His strong point is he came out as a populist in 2016 or 2015 and got the nomination and then won the presidency as a populist. His strength is he has a very strong following of people who believe that when he says something, he'll stay with it. When he says he'll build a wall, he'll build it. He didn't quite get the wall done. DeSantis is saying he is a winner. When he says a wall, and he's saying a wall, he'll get it done. Okay, so there's a difference. And back to Trump, what do they know about Trump? He's been hassled and hassled and hassled. 2 year Mueller investigation, which basically the recent Durham report says that when the FBI looked at that, they had reason to look at it, but based on what they found, they should have never gone forward, let alone have a 2 year investigation. People now know that if they've read the Durham report, and more likely they haven't, and they haven't been told much about it by the mainstream media because of that bias that exists.
I would
But
offer I would offer on the Durham
back to
report.
DeSantis.
Well, let me
Yeah,
insert. You bring up the
yeah.
Durham report, and it's important. It should have gotten a lot more coverage. I still want us to do more in depth on that. We haven't had the time covering the Illinois legislature ending. But on page 85 of that report, I would say there's a smoking gun that indicts basically the FBI, the CIA, President Obama, and Vice President Biden, because they were briefed by the director of the CIA that this whole Russian collusion story was nothing more than a fabrication of the Hillary Clinton campaign. Again, that is from the Durham report, page 85, folks, if you want to look it up. And that was August the 3rd of 2016, long before the November election, and obviously long before everything that went on in the Mueller investigation, when many of these people, these principals, were already aware that this was a fabrication, and they said nothing and allowed
The
this to go
trouble with
on.
all of that, Terry, that's probably not going to be what the presidential race is about. So
No, but I
let's
wanted to
do a
insert
little
that that's
speculation.
because the news media has not done their job in covering that story as they should. And this goes to the point of many, goes to the point of what Comer is saying, that there's a collusion of sorts between mainstream media the FBI, the CIA, in protecting, in this case, Joe Biden. Now, there is some indication of that, as we were just talking about the Durham report, and Durham came out and said much the same.
But back to what the race is about, what the primary is about, in particular the Republican primaries for president in Florida, which, by the way, there's some polling in Florida that shows it's Trump 40%, DeSantis 28%. We're still very early. We're 6 months before the caucuses in Florida, but that's quite a bit closer than the national polling. And what counts in our primaries are the states, not the national, okay? So, but the main issues, you and I would probably agree on this, in that Democratic presidential primary, they're going to be talking a lot about the borders, about 5 million or 6 million illegal immigrants coming into this country in the first 2 years of the, well, 2.5 years now of the Biden presidency. We're going to be talking about crime-infested cities. You may think that's not an issue, that's an issue for the cities, but I think that may be a national issue.
I think crime, it depends. Crime could be a major issue. The two primary issues I think that'll be in 2024 are the border and the economy.
And the economy, as you know, because we very well may be headed for a recession. That's not the kind of thing, if you're an incumbent president, if Biden is the candidate, you don't want to be running in 2024 when we're into a recession. We're into declining unemployment, declining employment, increasing unemployment, and perhaps increasing. We now have inflation coming down, but it's coming down from a 7% annual rate, which we went to maybe 5 or 6%. Will it go to 4 or 5%, or will it continue at that rate of 6 or higher? Will we have stagflation? These are all things that matter. But in addition, I think DeSantis will be saying, and I assume Trump will be saying as well, we're going to be talking about, free speech. We're going to be talking about some of the social issues. These social issues that people say aren't important. Across the country, people are concerned with education, and they want a president that stands up for the idea that kids should be going to schools where they're not getting indoctrinated, where they're not being told what to think, they're being taught how to think. This is all going on in Florida, but it's going on more nationally in Illinois, in Los Angeles.
Well, that's an interesting. It's interesting because I said the border and the economy, which are kind of hardcore, knock on wood, firm issues. But when you talk about, again, what's going on, a lot of times what people react to are social issues, as you said. On the left side, they're talking about trans rights and gun control and those issues. That's what they want to focus on. But we're seeing a revulsion by many on the conservative side of saying, why are you teaching trans rights? Why are you having drag queen reading hours? Why are you having, it's been lumped in as this woke ideology. And DeSantis has made a big point of saying, I'm anti-woke. I brought action against Disney for that. I kept some of these books in grade schools where they're talking about transsexualism, that it's not appropriate for young kids. I had those books taken out of the libraries in down in Florida. We'll have to see to what extent will these issues also bubble up and be a determining factor. And we see, by the way, we should add, look what's happening just recently, where the conservative consumers are really hurting some of these corporations that have gone woke. Obviously, Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch has lost a phenomenal. They're literally trying to give Bud Light away that they produce because it's sitting and not moving in these beer distribution centers. We've got Target that just lost something like $5 billion in market cap because they were selling gay clothing in the front of their stores. We got the Los Angeles Dodgers, not that I can go into every detail, that are having an event that's stirring up people there. So we'll have to keep an eye on that and see what impact they may, collectively, this stuff might come up.
But again, education is a big issue. Even though, again, it's a local issue, we happen to have somebody running for president who can be talking about that. Because Ron DeSantis... Don't we have
every candidate that can talk about education?
Well, they all can talk about it, but DeSantis has the advantage that in Florida, he can look at he can point to what he's done. So when an organization like the NAACP, which no longer represents the entities or individuals they said it represent, African Americans at large, when it says, oh, there's some problem, you shouldn't go, if you're black, to Florida, you won't be safe, he can point to the fact that black students in Florida are outperforming many of the other inner city areas where the black students are not performing, because those inner cities like Chicago and Los Angeles and New York and Baltimore are now controlled by the teachers unions. And that's a nationwide thing. And the point is, DeSantis, he doesn't have to say what he would do. He can say what he's done. He can say, as he has said, he favors scholarships on a national level so individuals in these other cities could, especially minorities, blacks and Hispanics, could have school choice. And Vivek Ramaswamy,
37-year-old former
30 millennial, who's accomplished a lot in his first 37 years in the private sector, accumulating, it said, a wealth of almost $700 million net worth. And he's talking about affirmative action blocking that because he wants to judge people on their skills.
He wants us to be judged on merit. And he's a capitalist, and he says capitalism works. Capitalism lifts people out of poverty. It gives them jobs. It creates wealth. You ought to be investing. And he's proven himself. He didn't come from wealth, but he has created wealth in his young life.
And we have teachers unions adopting resolutions that capitalism doesn't work, it's discriminatory, it hurts people's housing. This is being taught to your kids. And when we have teachers unions and saying, oh, we don't teach critical race theory, but they do teach the idea that there are oppressed people in your schools and they are the minorities and there are the oppressors and the whites. That's indisputable. Now, I don't know whether you want to call that critical race theory or not, but that is getting on people's nerves. So the point is, can this be discussed in an organized and thoughtful way? How does it affect Trump and DeSantis? And if it goes further, how does it affect Nikki Haley and her goal to be obviously the first female president in the United States? And she happens to be a minority, a woman of color with an ancestry from India. How does it affect Tim Scott, who is obviously African American and an accomplished person who's a U.S. state senator for the last 6 years?
Just to remind people, Tim Scott there on the far right, a black senator from South Carolina who gave a very compelling presidential opening address for his campaign that America is the land of opportunity and that his life is an example of that. Jeff, let me insert, because we only got about 30 seconds here. Folks, if you want to make a comment on any of the things here, tell Jeff and I who you think are the candidate that you prefer in the Republican nomination. Do you think that Joe Biden should be replaced as a Democratic nominee? And Jeff, let me let you have a comment on, close this out.
Well, just look at those 5 candidates, throw in Vivek Ramaswamy, and you can see how much has changed in the Republican Party.
We also have Larry Elder that's not in there.
Right.
We'll say goodbye, folks. Thanks for watching. As always, don't forget to let us know what you think.